Welcome to the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast, episode number 118. Hi, I'm Jill. Thank you for joining us today.
And I'm Chris. Jill and I are the founders of Becoming Ellie, which is a community for women over 50 who are interested in being fit, strong, and healthy.
We named our group Becoming Ellie because Ellie was the Norse goddess of aging who beat Thor in a wrestling match. Chris and I thought we should try to be like Ellie, but not that we're taking up wrestling.
You can find out more about the Becoming Ellie community and sign up for our newsletter at our website, becomingellie.com. And Ellie is spelled E-L-L-I.
Hey, we have some shout outs today. We have some reviews from Apple Podcasts.
Yes, listeners, thank you so much for writing reviews. I'm not sure exactly who we're thanking because the reviews are under different IDs, but we really appreciate you taking the time to write a review and give us a 5-star rating.
So in May of 2022, Has Fitness wrote, "Love this podcast. I have been addicted to this podcast since I found it. It is so informative and enjoyable. Chris and Jill are very inspirational and have the most interesting and motivational guests. I have learned so much from each episode. My health and fitness journey has been propelled forward by listening to this podcast."
Wow. Thank you. That's great. And on July 9th, Middle-Aged Femme wrote, "Thank you. Great down-home, honest advice from real women who get it." Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you to both of you. And I do agree that we have some very interesting and motivational guests.
I know I love listening to them.
And speaking of inspirational guests, I'm really excited about today's guest. We're talking with Brian Keane, who spoke to us from his home in Ireland.
Oh, yes. He gave us some wonderful information about being fit and strong. Let's go to the podcast. Brian Keane is a personal trainer, nutritionist, and best-selling author. Over the past 7 years, Brian has gone from working full-time as a school teacher to one of Ireland's and the UK's leading thought leaders on all things health, fitness, and nutrition.
Brian is the author of 2 bestsellers, The Fitness Mindset and Rewire Your Mindset. On top of his ever-growing social media platforms with over 500,000 followers, that's a lot of followers, he also hosts one of the world's top health podcasts, which is regularly featured #1 on the iTunes health charts.
He has spoken at major wellness events around the world, such as Wellfest Ireland, Mefit Dubai, and was a keynote speaker at Google headquarters in Dublin for their 2018 wellness event.
Among his many fitness and athletic achievements, Brian has transitioned from a professional fitness model to ultra-endurance athlete, running through the Sahara, the Arctic, and completing a 100-mile ultra marathon. Welcome, Brian. We are delighted to have you as our guest.
Jill and Chris, thank you so much for having me on. And thanks so much for the wonderful introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. That's very impressive. Running through the Sahara, the Arctic, and a 100-mile ultramarathon. That's impressive.
Yeah, I feel like we have a rock star for our guest today.
It sounds much better on paper, I assure you. It's one of those things that was a struggle, and it got some good stories out of it. But no, it's just something I do kind of on the side for my own fitness. It's my coaching and writing books and podcasts are kind of where my passion is at. But it doesn't mean I don't get to challenge myself physically as well. So something I like to do.
Yeah, great. So our listeners obviously are women over 50 who are interested in being fit and strong. And before we get into more specific questions about that, can you tell us if there's anything different for us from men or younger women that we need to do or focus on?
Yeah, 100%. I have kind of 2 trains of thought that I talk about on podcasts and on my social media channels. And one is that women are not small men, meaning that you can't prescribe an exercise or a nutritional program to a man and a woman and expect them to have similar results. There's so much more going on, particularly for females, menstrual cycles, time of the month, etc. And then that further extends into women who are 50 plus, depending on what stage of life they're at, whether they're in menopause, perimenopause, etc. All of these things come into play because you can't just take bread and butter, eat well, move more, when there's actually a lot more to the sports science and the sports nutrition and the nutrition aspects that can actually have a positive benefit to improving someone's fitness, particularly in that over 50 space.
We have a lot of listeners who are working on endurance racing. And when you work with women over 50 in ultra endurance events, are there special changes that you make to the training programs to maximize performance, like fuel or recovery or something for their joints, or I don't know?
Yeah, weirdly, when it comes to females in that over 50 space who are training for endurance, strength training is so important. So resistance-based training, normally with a compound lift-based program, so squats, deadlifts, some form of overhead presses, things built into the program. And although with endurance training and training programming, people think, well, if I run, I need to run, or if I cycle, I need to cycle, if I swim, I need to swim. And that's all true. But where you can miss out and where a lot of females tend to miss out is if you balance that with a strength program, you're going to have not only all the health and longevity benefits and the potential hormonal support, and depending on your stage of life, perimenopause, menopause, you're also going to have the sports performance impact. So something that people shy away from is that lifting heavy in the gym, when that actually has a whole host of positive benefits. And we can go into the nutrition and the sports nutrition as well, but from the training side, don't be afraid to lift heavy because it'll yield a whole host of benefits, from longevity to helping your physiology with perimenopause and menopause, all the way up to potentially improving performance in your actual sport, depending on what that is.
That's great. Thank you. It's good to hear.
Other listeners are just getting started on their journey to be fit and strong. What do you suggest for clients who come to you when they're just getting started? They don't know what they're doing.
I would say, and normally with fitness, and I've been working with people for over 10 years now in the health, wellness and fitness industry, and I've worked with all shapes and sizes, from athletes to people who are 300 pounds overweight to teenagers to people in their 50s and 60s plus. And the one thing holds true when it comes to the training side and the nutrition side, and that is that going from 0 to 1 is harder than going from 1 to 10, i.e. the start of anything is always going to be the most difficult part. And you normally find when people try and change up their nutrition or they try and change up their training, regardless of what point they're starting at, whether that's age 20, age 50, age 70, the start is always the hardest part because it's new. So I would normally recommend, before getting into any of the actual tactics of training and nutrition, is to set up a program that you can actually stick to. And this is something that my mum used to always tell me and still tells me to this day, that something is better than nothing. Meaning that if you don't train, going to the gym or working out at home with some resistance training or with your body weight, 1 session a week is better than no sessions a week. And 2 sessions is better potentially than 1. And then there's a point of diminishing returns once you kind of get to that 5 plus. But it holds true for 3, 4, 5 sessions potentially. And what I'd recommend is don't set the bar too high in the beginning. And I see this a lot in January, and I'm sure Jill and Chris, you're the same. When people decide, okay, overindulged at Christmas, it was a bit too much food, too much alcohol, I need to go to the gym 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7 days a week in January, and they hadn't been for maybe 6 or 12 months or even years before that, if ever. And that's a recipe for failure because it's too much change too soon. So the advice I'd say first and foremost is find something that fits into your lifestyle and schedule, and then stick with the fundamentals and the basics. When you're starting new, and if you're over 50, meaning that there's a reason that you haven't been working out from now until your age where you are currently, you have to think about, well, my body's not going to respond the exact same way as if I was 20. Your risk of injury is higher. You've been on this planet longer. You have potentially a history of injuries. There's so much more going on. You have to be a little bit more careful of just going in and doing incorrect form in the gym, because your risk to reward is higher, meaning that you could get injured faster. And that's not to say that doesn't happen to 20-year-olds or 25-year-olds. It does. It's just that it doesn't happen as easily. And anyone that's in their 50s plus, and I've worked with so many individuals in that bracket, will tell you the same thing, that they're just worried they might have an issue with knees or ankles or hips. And doesn't mean you don't train. You just train around them. Yeah. It's like, Chris, and it's something that
ankles, boy, that really is a sore spot with me, literally.
but it's true. And everybody, and I would say 80% of people have something, lower back, all the way up through the kinetic chain that could be a problem. And it doesn't mean don't train. It just means be more mindful of what you're doing. And I'm an advocate of, as I mentioned, lifting heavy. Like, one of the tools that crosses over, whether you're an endurance athlete or whether you're just a beginner who's trying to minimize some of the negative effects of perimenopause or menopause, lifting heavy has such a positive physiological response in your body in terms of hormonal balance, that you will feel those positive effects as the weeks and months go on. And basing your program around those core lifts, as I mentioned, squats, deadlifts, etc., with good form can be helpful. But if you're at the beginning stage, you might want to start in machines. Like, this is who machines were designed for. They were designed generally for either bodybuilders who are trying to get massive and jacked, or people who are injured who aren't able to do normal barbell and dumbbell based workouts, or individuals who are starting at the very beginning of their journey to learn the movement pattern. So you can go in and do a leg press in the gym, and that mimics the movement that you would do in a squat. So it's not completely unfamiliar to your body when you actually go and learn a squat, but you always want to have that progression. That's why working with a coach, working with a trainer, working on a program, listening to podcasts like this, or using YouTube to get those videos can be really helpful with bridging those gaps. And then you're looking to progress upwards. The same with the shoulder press, is just showing you the movement pattern for how to do an overhead military press or a dumbbell press. And then as you get more confident in 6, 8, 12 weeks time, because you're going regularly 2 times a week, 3 times a week, maybe 4 times a week, you can then progress on to barbell movements, onto dumbbell movements, and you'll get that positive response. And then it's just looking at your nutrition and aligning everything together.
A person who's starting out technically can lift heavy, even though you're starting at much lower weight or just practicing the form or whatever. That's what you're saying is. Yeah,
that's a brilliant point, Jill. And I'm glad you said that, because I want to add to that. Lifting heavy is very subjective. So when I say lifting heavy, I mean lifting within rep ranges that are in that 4, 5, 6 reps, meaning that you're doing 6 repetitions of a movement. So if you go into a leg press or a shoulder press machine, you're lifting a weight that you fail at 5 repetitions, meaning that you can't do 6, 7, 8, 9 more repetitions. You physically can't. Also, you're not stopping at 2 repetitions because it's too heavy. You're working to that rep range. Now, for one person, that might be 10 pounds. For somebody else, that could be 100 pounds. It's relative because of the strength. So you're working for that rep range. And a very traditional strength program that can work well for women over 50 is going in with those compound lifts that I mentioned, working for 4 to 6 repetitions. So failing at 4, 5, or 6 reps, taking a 90-second to 2-minute rest, and doing that 3 to 5 times on 2 or 3 different movements. That's your entire gym program potentially for 6, 8, 12 weeks. And then you can build it from there.
Okay, great.
Well, my next question might seem a little silly then, because I was going to ask you cardio, strength, stretching, flexibility, balance, agility. If you're going to pick the best exercises, what would they be and why?
Oh, it's a great question. And the truth is, it's kind of, when I think about cardio, flexibility, resistance training, it's kind of like if somebody goes, well, what do you prefer, your dishwasher or your shower? And my answer would be, well, they do different jobs. They're not a direct comparison.
They do different jobs.
I love them both.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my answer, similar to cardio and strength training and flexibility, etc. It's very much a case of, well, what's going to yield? I always like to look at training and nutrition as what's the one thing that'll have a positive impact on 10 different things or 100 different things. And that's why strength training I would have at the base, because a lot of women over 50, from my experience, particularly tend to gravitate towards cardio. And I get it. It makes sense. It's low impact. It doesn't hurt as much. And some people have misconceptions around, well, what will happen if I lift weights? Will I get big? Will I get bulky? I might get injured. I don't know how. That's an unfamiliar movement pattern. There's so many things that stop people, and I get it. And cardio has a time and a place. It's fantastic for health and heart health and longevity potentially. And if you're an endurance athlete, it's part and parcel of your course in terms of how you train. But for the average person that's looking to get into working out and training, what will normally happen is they'll start to strength train and they'll feel those positive impacts. They'll feel better. They'll feel stronger. And then they can put some cardio in on top of that. And same with flexibility and balance and agility. All of those movements and potential movements that you add tend to be, a combination of, what will give me a lot of benefit mixed with what do you enjoy? Because I can say, as a qualified personal trainer, certified sports nutritionist, someone who's been doing it and working with people for 10 years, I can say, do your strength training, you get all these benefits. But if you really don't like it, then you probably want to just apply what I call a MED in books, the minimum effective dose. What's the minimum amount of the thing you need to do to get benefit that you won't actually spend all week doing? But if you love yoga, or you love Pilates, or you love something along those lines, then that's going to have benefit for core strength. It'll have benefit for balance. It'll have benefit for flexibility. And it's something you can stick to over the long term. So at the age of 50 plus, and I think the oldest I've worked with is 70 plus, 72. And the advice isn't a million miles away in the terms of, well, what do you like to do? Like, you want to get a benefit from this, but you also have to be able to stick to it and like it. So I can say, do strength training, and I have a bias because of my background in sports science and knowing what the benefit and physiological and hormonal positive impacts it can have. But reality is, if you don't like that, then you might be better at looking at an alternative. So it feels like a bit of a cop-out answer in terms of covering all my bases, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
Do you think that do you ever tell people, do your strength training and try it for a month, 2 months, and see if you still dislike it afterwards? Because I think sometimes people come to strength training saying, oh, I hate this. But if they actually get good at it, they might actually come to like it.
That happens all the time. I would say I actually can't recall one instance where it went in reverse, where somebody would do a 6 or 12 week program and then they're like, no, and I get it. If you think about it, it's the fear of uncertainty. It's the fear of unknown. It's the fear of nobody likes to do anything that they're not good at.
Well, right.
We're all like that. I had a friend of mine taking me out surfing recently, and it felt so awkward because I don't know how to get up on the board, and he's there hopping up, and it feels awkward because it's new. I'm not familiar with it. And everybody has that little bit of I don't feel that good. I'm not able to do this. But after you do anything for 6 weeks or anything for 12 weeks consistently, even if it's 2-3 times a week, you will get better at it. And as you build more confidence, and more so as you start to either physically see the benefits or mentally feel the benefits in terms of your night sweats aren't as bad because you have more of a hormonal balance, or you're feeling that your absorption of food is better and you're not as bloated and you're not feeling as tired day to day, you start to get these improvements. You learn to love it, if not in the moment, because it's hard. I don't think anybody loves it when they're really pushing in the moment, but the after effects tend to kind of get a secondary love or even a primary love for it, and people tend to keep it then, from my experience.
Yeah.
All right. So if people are doing strength training and they want to throw in cardio, do you think they should do the cardio on a separate day, or can they do it before or after their strength training? It's
really interesting because I'm one of those coaches who geeks out on the science and the research. Like, I will literally spend hours on PubMed going through the research. It's one of the things that I love to do. And when it comes to cardiovascular activity, one, it's always going to be goal dependent as well, obviously depending on when you do it. But for the most even impact on body composition, whether it's losing fat or toning up or longevity for heart health or whatever it is, the time is largely irrelevant in the sense of your physiological response, in terms of how your body responds. So the answer is, do it when suits you. If it's better to do it in the morning, do it in the morning. If you want to do it fasted, do it fasted. If you want to do it after the end of a workout, do it at the end of the workout. It's really about when you want to do it. The one thing I will say here is, if we're talking women over 50, I know the primary listenership of your podcast, you're talking HIIT training for maximum benefit. If you're talking actual physical response in terms of positive hormonal response, you're looking at high intensity interval training, your HIIT training. So it might look like a cross trainer, 30 seconds sprinting as fast as you can, a cross trainer, followed by a minute recovery, repeating that 7 to 10 times. That is what you will yield the most benefit if we're going off current research. Yeah, in terms of what works for people, in terms of that age bracket. Now, this obviously is very context dependent. If I talk to someone who's 24, 25, I'll have a different answer depending on context. But if you're talking people in that perimenopausal and menopausal range, that high intensity interval, heavy strength training and high intensity cardio are the methodologies that will have the most positive impact on physical performance, hormonal function, general well-being in terms of just feeling better day to day in that demographic. So I generally say to experiment with that, and most will gravitate towards 20 minutes on a cross trainer or walking on a treadmill, and that's fine. Like, that will improve heart health and it'll help with a little bit of extra calorie burn for weight loss and all of these potential things. But if you're looking to really maximize everything in your workouts, that's where the area I'd be focusing on.
Yep, that's great advice, and something that I tend to forget. So that's an excellent reminder. Much better to go out and do those intervals than spend an hour running on a treadmill.
Or walking on a treadmill. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Listening to my podcast. No.
Yeah. And just to say, I'm talking purely for benefit. If you like walking on a treadmill, if you enjoy the cross trainer, I'm like, by all means do it. I'm only talking kind of in terms of a benefit, cost benefit analysis kind of way.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I want to switch it up a little bit here and talk about mental mindset, because I know for myself, building a resilient mental mindset is especially challenging. Do you have suggestions for me and for our listeners about how we can build a mindset of mental toughness?
The answer is my second book, Rewire Your Mindset, is very much heavy on the mindset side of things. And something that I wrote about in that book that I still use to this day is what I call my anchors of self-discipline, or anchors of mental resilience. And that means that you pick 3 things that are non-negotiables that you do every day that form pillars or anchors for your daily mental resilience. And I have 3 for me. One is getting up early. I'm not an early bird by nature. I prefer to sleep until 10, 11 a.m. and then get up. That's just the way my clock is wired. An early bird is what I do. I get up every morning. I get up now at 6 a.m. And that is one of my anchors of self-discipline for building that mental resilience. And then the second thing is I try and run at the end of every workout. So as someone that's ran multiple marathons and multiple ultra marathons, I don't actually enjoy running. I'm not really built for running. Like, it's not I'm 5'8", 185 pounds. Like, I'm quite thick. I'm built like a hobbit. I'm really small and stocky. So I'm not really built for long distance. So running is something that still I find quite challenging. And I try and do that at the end of every workout. And then the third thing is I read every day. And I tend to be a podcast first, audiobook person first, because I tend to be an audio learner. But I've forced myself over the years to read more physical books, just whether it's business related or personal development related, things that help me move my life forward in a positive way. So I try and do that nearly every day. And one of my mentors used to tell me that to successful people do the thing they have to do regardless of how they feel. And building up that self-discipline, that muscle of self-discipline in terms of repetition, and building that mental toughness and that mental resilience is down to conditioning yourself to do the things you have to do regardless of how you feel. So picking any 3 things, it can be anything, prepping meals or prepping lunch for the following day, or going for a walk after work, or doing that strength training, although you're a little bit afraid to do it at the minute. It can be anything, but I would say pick 3 things that become non-negotiables for you. You do them every day, or you do them every training day, and they just become part of your new normal. And as you do that over time, you'll start to see your mental resiliency and mental toughness growing.
Oh, that's great advice.
I love that. Yeah.
Sort of playing into that is that things happen, life comes along, you go on holiday or you do something and you get off track. And when you come back, you're no longer maybe eating the way you normally eat or working out the way you normally work out. And sometimes just that getting back on track is hard. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, and so applicable, because I don't think it doesn't matter who you speak to, whether it's male, female, age 20, age 30, age 40, age 50, age 60, that falling off track comes with part of life. Because otherwise it's just we can't stick to the same food all the time, the same training regimen. There's family, work commitments, all these things that can potentially put us off track. And it is as simple as when you go off plan, I tell people to reset and get back on plan. And in the last book was The Keen Edge. It was a fat loss book, a mindset around fat loss, all about weight loss, fat loss. It wasn't kind of the life side like my second book. And one of the tools I gave in there was, not pressing I won't say it here button, but the F it button when you go off plan. So when somebody, eats off plan.
Call it the pizza button.
The pizza button. That's it. The more politically correct way of saying the pizza button. But pressing the pizza button and then be like, okay, I'll get back on track on Monday, and writing off the weekend, or letting one bad meal turn into a bad day of eating, or letting one bad weekend turn into a bad week of eating, letting one bad week turn into a bad month of eating, or missing training. Insert your thing here. And what I tell people is learning to reset is a skill. And reset is effectively as it sounds, that you go off plan and there's nothing wrong. You're not a bad person. You don't need guilt around it. You don't need shame around it. You don't need any of these negative emotions. You just reset and you get back on track again. And the physical analogy that I get people to think of, it's like driving your car down the motorway or down the highway. And if you get one flat tire, getting out of your car and slashing the other 3 tires because one went flat, you wouldn't do that with your car, but people do it with their training, they do it with their diet, they do it with their nutrition, and they don't learn to reset. So that visual normally gets people to think, oh, actually, I wouldn't do it with my car, I won't do it with my diet or training either.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, I love that. I want to switch the topic now to food and weight loss. Having been overweight and losing a significant amount of weight, now I find it difficult to keep the weight off consistently. And I'm wondering, do you have suggestions of improving my goal of keeping the weight off maybe? Or, how do you help your clients to reach their goals?
It's a tricky one to approach because obviously individual contexts will be so much dependent on the person. So what I say to you, Chris, would be different to Jill, which would be different to somebody else. And there's a few truths that can be useful to apply here. One is, it takes a while to get your nutrition and diet to what I call in books the right automatic food choice, or your new normal. Meaning that once you hit a certain weight loss goal, fat loss goal, body composition goal, there'll be this time when it takes a lot of cognitive effort to get there. You have to think about what you're eating. You're very conscious of food choices. You're very mindful of caloric intake potentially, or the foods you're eating. And it's taken up a lot of mental real estate. But the longer, and that's what it's like in the beginning. But over time, that gets easier. It becomes the right automatic food choice. You end up knowing that actually this is what food works for my body, and these are my hunger cues and the times of the day when I normally get hungry, and you become more in tune with that, and then it starts to take up less mental real estate. So it normally takes, the University of London says that it takes 66 days to form a new habit, and I found with the people I've worked with over the years, it really is dependent on their starting point. I liken food behavior and habitual change to pulling up seeds in the ground versus knocking down an oak tree. Like if you plant a seed outside in the garden, you can go out there tomorrow and dig it up. It's relatively straightforward. You go out to try and pull up a sapling, it's harder than the seed, but you can, a little bit of effort and you'll get it up. You try and get an oak tree out of the ground, good luck. That's going to take a lot longer. And that's how habits are, and that's how behaviors are. The longer you've been doing something, the more difficult it is to change. So if you're someone who's been eating a certain way for 40 years or 45 years or 50 years, if you're in that 60-year plus bracket, or the majority of your adult life, it might take a little bit longer to start making the right automatic food choice and making the way that you eat your new normal. But it will get there. It's just a matter of time and being patient and consistent with it. After that, then I would say that weight loss and fat loss isn't a goal per se, in terms of, it's not a lifestyle per se, it's a goal or a phase, meaning that if you are in this perpetual state of wanting to lose weight, wanting to lose fat, you're doing something wrong.
Right.
And I call it in the last book, and this is a line that gets quoted back to me so often on social media channels, is if you've been dieting half your adult life, you're doing it wrong. And that means that if you're on and off diets and your weight is going up and down, your process is wrong, you're doing it wrong, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a projection of a badness onto anybody. That's just the way it is. That failure can be feedback to what's not working. And I think when you look at nutrition and you look at diet and you look at fat loss and weight loss as phases as opposed to a lifestyle, you're trying to get into this point where, well, I want to lose a little bit of weight now. I want to drop 5 pounds or 10 pounds, or I want to lose a little bit of body fat. But if you're doing that all year round, or for 2 years or for 3 years, there's a problem with your process, regardless of age, because yes, there's a lot more hormonal issues to consider the older you get, particularly as a female, but the primary fundamentals of caloric restriction to a degree in terms of energy in, energy out plays a role. Food choices obviously play a role. all of these things being consistent with it play a role. And you're looking to maybe alternate goals throughout the year. So I wouldn't say you should have weight loss unless you're obese or you're clinically overweight. You shouldn't have weight loss as a goal for 12 months, maybe for 3, maybe even for 6. If you really want to lose weight for a particular date or an event or whatever, just for yourself. But you might want to look, well, do you know what? I'd like to run a 5-kilometer race or a 10-mile run or maybe a half marathon or a marathon, or maybe I'd like to hit a personal best on the squat in the gym. I think alternating goals, once you kind of get to that new normal or some relativeness of that new normal, that's the real success outlook that people can have, so that they're not having this perpetual state of I need to lose weight, I need to lose weight, I need to lose weight, and it's going. Whereas if you just get to that right automatic food choice, start to learn what works for your body, which will happen the longer you're doing it, and then you're alternating your goals throughout the year, you'll do much better with it from my experience.
Thanks. That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, sure is.
Good advice.
What advice do you have for those who want to reduce their fat, rather than concentrating on saying, I want to lose 10 pounds? If you just say, I want to lose some percentage of fat on my body, what advice do you have for those people?
There's a few ways to approach this. Firstly, I tell people that weight loss and fat loss are 2 different things, that it's important to know the difference. Weight loss is reducing the numbers and lowering the numbers on a scale. Fat loss is reducing the amount of body fat that's our actual fat that's on your body. They're 2 different goals. And people normally confuse them. And the kind of left field example that I've given is you wouldn't use a number in your bank account to track how good you are in bed. That tends to be the one that lands on my podcast with people, where they're like, well, one metric doesn't equal the other. And that's what happens with weight loss and fat loss, where people are, well, I want to look better, I want to feel more confident, I want my clothes to fit better, and they're only tracking weight loss. And that they're 2 separate things. So although it's important, I think, to track both, which I can get onto, knowing first and foremost that they're 2 separate goals is important. And with that in mind, then, the fat loss is normally down in the majority of people, and I would say anybody up until age 40. Caloric restriction helps, although it's not the be all and end all, meaning that you need to be in a calorie deficit, consuming less calories than your body needs so you can tap into stored fat for fuel. It's the only scientific principle, it's the law 1 of thermodynamics, that you can't really get around. But as you age, 45, 50, 55, that still holds true, but food choices start to play a much more important role because of the hormonal imbalance that can come as you age. And it's very important that you look at, and again, different dietary strategies will work for different people, but a good approach is normally complete protein sources. If you're someone that eats, chicken, fish, lean meats, all can work well, or food combinations. If you're plant-based, your chickpeas, your quinoa, etc. Complex carbohydrates to a degree, your brown rice, your yams, sweet potato, porridge, oats, all of these things can be helpful. And then healthy fats, so important for women in their 50s plus for hormonal balance. Your avocados, your nut butters, your olive oils. And again, not eating too many of these foods because they're very calorically dense, meaning that you don't actually have to eat or consume a lot of them to have a lot of calories, which can have a negative impact. But within the right balance, they keep everything ticking over hormonally and can make you feel better. And when you're feeling better, particularly in that menopausal state where you might have night sweats, your sleep might be poor, all of these low energy or just not feeling as good in terms of your mood throughout the day, that hormonal balance that can come with that increase in dietary fat can help with a lot of that. And once you combine that with the strength training I talked about earlier, one of the tools that people forget when it comes to strength training is strength training has a very positive impact on your metabolic rate, meaning that you burn more calories while you're resting when you increase your metabolic rate. One of my pet peeves, I used to live in California, and this was so bad in California, was the diet teas and the metabolism boosting teas and all of these things that by all means, they might taste lovely and have a little bit of a positive impact, but they're not going to jack your metabolism and help you burn a load of calories by 33% like they suggest. And I wish they did. I wish, hand on heart, wish it was as straightforward as that. But your metabolism is a
magic pill, the silver bullet.
I would love it. And if it was, I would come on the podcast and say, take this tea, drink this tea, eat this pill, and mic drop. But that just isn't the reality, I'm afraid. But what does have a positive impact on your metabolic rate and can boost your metabolism is strength training. And the analogy that I use is you burn more calories while you're resting off the back of a strength training session compared to a cardiovascular session, such as a cross trainer or walking on a treadmill, where you might burn more calories within that hour, but then you largely stop burning calories. And weight training, strength training, resistance training is the calorie burning equivalent of making money while you sleep. So you can be sitting at home watching a TV show, or sitting at home playing with your kids or your grandkids, or sitting at home doing nothing, and you're still burning calories as your body repairs from that strength session that you did. So to think about that, if you need that little bit of an extra push with a fat loss or a body composition goal or a weight loss goal, and you're not really into strength training, knowing that and understanding that this can actually help with my weight loss and my fat loss because of the effect of burning more calories and boosting that metabolism can be the little bit of a extra push that people need to kind of design that into their program.
That's great. Yeah. It's the mindset thing. Thinking of how that makes such a difference. So many folks have different ways of eating that works for them: vegan, paleo, keto, intermittent fasting, many small meals, often. I don't know. How do you help someone find the best way to eat for their lifestyle, their goals, their schedule, that type of thing?
There's a 3-prong approach and 3 questions I get people to ask themselves. I'm a big fan of different nutritional strategies for different people. I think all of the ones you've mentioned there, Chris, potentially work if you're able to adhere and stick to them, particularly for weight loss, for fat loss. If you're going performance, endurance, depending on goal, there's going to be context that I'd need. But I normally get people, okay, is the nutritional plan you're following first and foremost in alignment with your goals? Is what you're eating in alignment with what you're looking to do? Improve your perimenopausal or your menopausal symptoms, increase strength, improve endurance for a race. Is it in alignment with your goals? You need to check that off. Secondly, does it fit into your lifestyle and schedule? Is it something that you're able to actually stick to with lifestyle and schedule? So something like intermittent fasting is very popular for people who are very busy because you just skip breakfast or you skip a meal and there's nothing to prepare. So that is why that can be such an effective strategy for people. So you're looking to, does it hit your lifestyle and does it fit into your schedule? And the last thing I would say, and this is my own bias as a nutritionist, does it include foods that you enjoy? Time and time again, I've seen people fall off diets, fall off either fad diets or what can be objectively seen as good diets, plant-based, keto, etc., depending on the goal, because they don't have foods they enjoy. Meaning that they could do it for a week, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 2 months if they're really disciplined with their food, but ultimately they'll fall off. And that's why I think including foods that you enjoy, and if that means that you broaden the foods that you eat so that you can experiment with more, then that's what you do. Or you have your own little recipes that you like to go back to regularly that become staples in your program. I think once you do those 3 things, is your nutritional plan in alignment with your goals? Does it include foods that you enjoy? And does it fit into your lifestyle and schedule? I think you can make any diet work for you.
That's great.
Giving up foods that you really like is the one that I would struggle with, because what's the point of that?
Exactly. Well, and I something I'll say to you, Jill, what's your favorite food? Like, what if it's sweet food, or like I'm an ice cream chocolate person. Are you sweet tooth, savory?
I'm more of a sweet tooth person. Yeah. So ice cream is fantastic. And
okay. All right. Let me see. And Chris, what would you put on yours? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, I really like salty, the oily, salty kind of things.
Chips.
Okay.
Yeah,
chips.
Like chips. So and I just totally have to block them out.
So we have chips here and we have ice cream here. Now, if I said to both of you, Jill and Chris, don't think of a purple polar bear.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to your mind is a purple polar bear. And when I tell somebody, don't eat ice cream or chocolate, don't eat chips, first thing they think of, oh, I'd love some ice cream, or I'd love some chips. And straight away, you're what I call in the book, it's like trying to run a marathon with one leg. Like, you can do it. It just is considerably harder. And that's the same with dieting. As soon as you eliminate and say, I cannot have these foods, they are off limits, full stop, you want them. It just can be a little bit disabling for people when it comes to designing their nutritional plan. So I try and re-educate people that, yes, there's certain foods that are out there that are low nutrient and high calories, and they might not be the quote unquote best food for you, but they're not necessarily good or bad. Like, that's morals that we project onto it. Like, you know, a chocolate bar, ice cream, or chips aren't going to stab you down a back alley, and a head of broccoli is not going to save you from a burning building. Like, we project our morals onto food. So the context is really important here. So I think food relationship, and, you know, if you love those foods, I think there's probably a time and a place for them. Yeah, you're not going to have a tub of ice cream and a whole massive bag of chips every day, but having them in your plan, factored into potentially calories or whatever way you want to do in terms of strategy, I think is a successful approach for the majority of people.
That's great. That's good advice, I think. What is the biggest mistake that people make when they're trying to figure out how to eat and what to eat?
Two things come to mind, and I already touched on one, and that is making too many changes too soon.
Okay.
I had a client, now he was male and he was younger. He was 36, 37, late 30s. Back when I used to do one-to-one personal training, now I do all my programs are online now since 2016, but back when I was working as a one-to-one personal trainer, he was 250 pounds overweight, and he used to eat 10 Mars bars every day after lunch, like one of the two of the family size packets. So there was 5 in each packet. And for our first week of nutrition, I said, I don't want you to do anything with your nutrition, no changes, except I want you to eat 9 Mars bars instead of 10. I was like, I don't want you to eat 10. I want you to eat 9. And he was like, I can't eat 9. I'm here to lose weight. What are you doing? I was like, just eat your 9. I said, eat everything that you're eating as normal, but just eat 9 Mars bars instead of 10. He said, okay. And he came back a week later and he was down on weight. And he was like, okay, I don't know how I lost weight eating 9 Mars bars. I said, brilliant. Now we're going to go down to 8. And he's like, no, but if I cut them, I'll lose way more weight. I said, no, 8 Mars bars after dinner. I was like, I want you to eat your 8 Mars bars after dinner every day. And over the several weeks, we ended up getting it down to where he was eating 3, and he kept losing weight every single week. And that shows the importance of calories. Now, he was 250 pounds overweight to begin with, and he was somebody who had fallen off diets for the previous 10 years because he would try and make too many changes too soon. He would go from eating his pizzas and his 10 Mars bars after dinner to eating salad for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And he wouldn't be able to stick to it. So that changes too soon, and too many changes too soon is a recipe for failure. So small, seemingly small changes lead to potentially extraordinary results. But the second thing, and I think it's important, and this is what I love about what you're doing, Chris and Jill, is filtering the noise online in terms of all the information that's out there that confuses and conflicts people, and pick 2, 3, or 4 people, podcasts, Instagram accounts, blog posts, and get your information from there. Because otherwise you have, and this is it's a bit of a curse of knowledge on my side. I've been studying nutrition for a long time. I'm a certified nutritionist. It's the thing I geek out on. And I will see people come on and talk about plant-based diets, saving the world in terms of body change and weight loss. And then I'll have somebody saying carnivore diets where you can't eat plants, they're poison. And people will argue the same thing with completely opposite sides.
Right.
So the truth is somewhere, but it confuses people. And the same thing goes for keto diets and intermittent fasting. And there's so much persuading evidence in one way or the other. So I think narrowing down your focus on where you consume your information from, whether that's training related, whether that's nutritional information, is important, because, it's the old adage that there's too many cooks in the kitchen. Like, nothing gets done then. If you're consuming way too much content, you will get confused, and confusion normally leads to frustration. And I think just picking 2, 3, 4 resources, podcasts such as this, Instagram accounts, blog posts that you read, that's where you get your information from, until you get to the point where you're able to filter the noise from the signal, meaning that after a certain point, same as that new normal, I can follow 100 accounts and know, well, that's evidence backed, that's scientific backed, that's not, that's anecdotal, that's opinion. And I can filter that now because I've been doing it for more than 10 years. But if you're early on in your journey, you don't have that information. I use the example with like cryptocurrency. I know very little about cryptocurrency. So I have 2 people I follow and I listen to what they say, because I don't know what's right or wrong. So if somebody's saying it's this or it's that, I don't know at this point if they're telling the truth or not. So right. If I do that with 10 or 100 people, I get really confused. So you have to narrow that field of vision temporarily. And then once you're able to filter, well, that's legit, that applies to me, that doesn't, do it until then. And you'll find that you'll have considerably less frustration and confusion.
Oh, that's really good advice. What about emotional eating? Do you have any advice for people?
Yeah, this was the section I got the most Instagram tags on in the last book, The Keen Edge, because I have an emotional eating chapter in there, and there's a table that I put in there about emotional hunger versus physical hunger. And you never know when you write a book in terms of what's going to land with people, but that's the thing that I got the most screenshots of when I'm resharing on stories on Instagram. And that was that table. And there's just a couple of check-ins I get people to do. So emotional hunger versus physical hunger. And there's 10 of them on each side in the book, but some that connect with people that are early on is, well, emotional hunger tends to be in your head. Physical hunger tends to be below the neck, above the neck, below the neck. And you'll feel that it's your head, that something has happened. There's been a stressor, or you're feeling just overwhelmed, and it's all up in your head. And then that's the emotional side versus an actual intuitive hunger cue you're getting below the neck. That's one thing. Hunger also, in terms of emotional hunger versus physical hunger, is sudden versus slow. Physical hunger tends to build up and gradually increases over time the longer you haven't eaten. Emotional hunger tends to come on very suddenly. It means that it's coming on and it's gone from
reaction.
It's a reaction, and you're having this emotional response. And those two check-ins alone, on top of the other ones that I give, can be important to just establish, well, am I emotionally eating now, or am I actually physically hungry? And just having a check-in, something that allows you to run through, well, how quickly did this come on? And what you'll find is a lot of it is down to that emotional response. Something has happened, stress related, you got angry, or you got sad, or you feel lonely, or something has happened emotionally that set off this kind of chain reaction. And once you have something to check in with that, you can put in alternative strategies. I talk about alternative stress management strategies that you can apply within those moments to kind of break off that cycle of where you disconnect. I call it Jekyll and Hyde in the book, where somebody else takes over, eats all the food, and then you're like, oh my God, what happened? Where are the bag of crisps gone? Where's the ice cream gone? And that's important. So doing those check-ins can be important for people, because emotional hunger and physical hunger are two different things.
Thank you. That's good.
I think we've all experienced that. So if there's one message that you would like to leave our listeners with, what might that be?
Lift heavy.
Very good. I love that.
Yeah, I think it wraps up everything in terms of your audience and the demographic and the amount of benefit that one thing can have. I think just start to lift heavy and start to see the benefits, and then you'll become addicted to it in a positive way from there.
Okay, great.
So if our listeners would like to follow you, where should they go online?
Amazing. Thanks so much. Yeah. So the Brian Keane podcast is my podcast. We're coming up to episode 400 on there. Been going at it for a few years now. So it's doing really well. My social media platforms is Brian Keane Fitness, and I'm on everything. I'm on all the channels. And then my books, my 3 books, The Fitness Mindset, Rewire Your Mindset, and The Keen Edge, Mastering the Mindset for Real Lasting Fat Loss, is on Amazon, Book Depository, everywhere online. It's in selected bookstores as well, but I generally send people online because it's easier to get. So that's where all my stuff is.
Cool. Well, we'll put those in the show notes. We'll put links in there so that people can find you.
Amazing. And thanks so much again. And Jill and Chris, keep serving your market. I absolutely love this space that you're covering. It's an area that I've become a little bit addicted with, as you can tell from the research over the last few years, just because of all the new research that's coming out, particularly with perimenopause and menopause in relation to athletes and people with strength training. So keep doing what you're doing. And thanks so much again.
Oh, well, thank you so much for talking with us today. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Pleasure was all mine.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
So one of the things I really liked was when Brian said about you can make change by using the 3 pillars and just having 3 things that you commit to doing. That really just resonated with me. I've been feeling like I'm not really on track lately, and I think that might be something I could do. So I just have to decide what my 3 things should be. I know Brian's were 1, get up early, like at 6 a.m, and 2, read for an hour a day, even though he's not a big reader, and he runs at the end of every workout.
And you know what's interesting about running at the end of the workout? It teaches you to run when you're exhausted, Right. So when you're doing ultra events, that's how you feel, or that's what I understand. That's how you feel.
Yeah.
I have to say, I've never done an ultra event, but long runs I have done, and training when you're tired. You have to train when you're tired if you want to be able to run. When you're tired, yes. Sometimes when I would be training and I would think, all right, I'm going to run for, let's say, 30 minutes, and then something would happen and I would think, okay, I'll run for 10 more. That turned out to be a really good practice, because there have been races where I thought, all right, this is a
5K, so it should be 5K. And my watch would say it was 5K. And then it would turn out there was another like half a mile to go. So you have to, it was actually good to practice that weird things. But anyway, I thought the 3 pillars was just was a great idea.
Well, you know what? I liked what he said about mindset. And he was talking about when you sort of fall out of your routines, whether, it's family obligations or you got sick or, whatever, and trying to get back into it. He said, you think of a car, if you have a flat tire, you don't turn around and slash the other 3 tires. You change the tire and get back into it. And I really appreciated that. And the next time I'm thinking, I don't feel like it or whatever, I'm going to remember that just because you had a flat tire last Tuesday doesn't mean you have to have a flat tire on Thursday or slashing the other tires. It was kind of a good one.
Using that flat tire metaphor, if you tend to call people for help for changing your tire, it's a good reminder that if you need help getting back on track, you should call your friends or ask someone or...
Yeah, the road crew.
Yeah. I mean, you can ask for help.
Yep. Well, I also liked what he talked about with strength training and how it permanently changes. Permanent's not the right word, but it changes your metabolic rate. So even though, like let's say if you do cardio, then when you're done, it pretty much is over. But if you do strength training, that continues to build muscles and burn calories, which is a, really important thing too, if you're trying to maintain your weight.
Yeah. And strength training was his number one thing. If you could only do one thing, strength training.
Lift heavy.
Lift heavy. Yeah.
Lift heavy. So I don't know. I really enjoyed hearing about this.
I did too.
Had a lot of great things there.
And I always think it's important to remember that lift heavy, it's a relative term, that what's heavy for you might not be the same for me.
Right. Yeah. You can't compare yourself to other people.
You lift where you start. Find yourself where you are and don't overdo it, but that's your goal.
Or compare yourself to a couple years ago when you could do something that you can't do right now.
Right.
But being realistic. Well, I'd love to hear from our listeners about what they thought about today's episode.
Yeah. So let me know if you have 3 things that you commit to doing every day, because I'm curious to hear what others are doing.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. Yeah. Please share with us anything about your fitness and health journey. We'd love to hear from you.
You can reach us at our website, becomingellie.com, or on any of our social media accounts. You can find us as Becoming Ellie at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and YouTube.
Also, be sure to join our private Facebook group where we encourage and support each other.
It was great talking with you today, Chris. I'm looking forward to our next episode of the Fit Strong Women Over 50 podcast.
I am too. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.